Hello everyone, this is Ivo Maropo again with you, and in this video I will continue our journey through this great thinker called Hegel, this great German idealist called Hegel. Okay, and I will also continue the subject of our previous video, which is to say Hegel and the problem of freedom. And to do so, I will take recourse to two examples. That of the flip of a coin, the flip of a coin, and the throw of a dice. Okay? And I will try to articulate what I think are very important insights into Hegel's thought by taking recourse to these two very trivial and even vulgar examples. Okay? All right. Let's just think of what really happens when we flip a coin. You do it, and while the coin is still in the air, flying in the air, its true status is indeterminate. In other words, it's contingent. It could be either this or that. It's radically random, undetermined. And by being radically undetermined, once the coin arrives on the palm of your hand, it is felt as destiny, as fate, as necessity, as necessary. Okay? It can only be determined as such without any undesirable remainder in the process of its determining, because it is contingent. Okay? So by being radically contingent, while it arrives on the top of the palm of your hand, it becomes necessary, but freely so. It's freely necessary. Okay? It's a necessity which doesn't raise any questions about its authority, its mode of being. It simply is what it is. It has all the authority it needs to be what it is, and that's all there is to say about this entity. Okay, this necessity. And the same goes for the example of throwing a dice. Okay, you throw a dice, and while it's still in the air, its, let's call it, ontological status is undefined, remains undefined, undetermined. But once it arrives, it is necessity. But it's again freely necessary. Okay? And that's a good reason behind the idea that you have in philosophy, that freedom is on the side of necessity, not on the side of contingency. A totally contingent freedom is self-defeating. It defeats itself. It leads to nowhere. It has to be a free necessity so that we can be really free. So for philosophy in general, freedom is on the side of necessity, but a free necessity, just like it is when the dice arrives and when the coin arrives on the top of your palm. Okay? It's the same kind of free necessity. No one questions this determination. Okay? And of course, this is how the act overcomes itself. The act of determining. Okay? That's the only way an act can be pure. It's an act without remainder, without further complication. Yeah, but you know, whenever someone flips a coin and the coin arrives no one questions the authority of this determining. Okay, and this is also Hegel's problem. He's trying to arrive exactly at the moment where the flip of the coin is possible, or the throw of the dice. Okay, that's how necessity arises out of contingency. Okay, there is not only a necessary contingency, there is also a contingent necessity. Necessity itself is contingent, but once it is here, once it happens, it is destiny, it is fate, it is necessary, but it's a free necessity. Okay, that's a very important paradox that we get in Hegel and Žižek and all that. Okay, it's a free necessity. The true necessity, the true freedom is the necessity of a free necessity. Okay, so yeah, but there is more. Okay, what is it that Žižek calls less than nothing? Okay, he's also pretty much preoccupied with this notion of the beginning. How can a beginning begin? A proper beginning begin? The only way to do it is by an abyssal beginning, which he calls less than nothing. And to understand this notion, he takes recourse to quantum physics. He uses Freud's notion of death drive. He talks about Peter Higgs' notion of a field, the Higgs field, which is again a kind of a less than nothing, out of which nothing as a stabilized field can emerge. That is not only nothing. One has also to postulate a less than nothing, out of which nothing itself can arise as a minimally stabilized field. Okay, within where things take place, happen. So that's the reason for this less than nothing title for Žižek. And not only less than nothing, just remember his book, the book he released in 2014, Absolute Recoil, which is again a Hegelian category, absolute Gegenstoß. It's a recoil, but it's an absolute recoil. It's such a radical recoil that there's nothing to be said about this recoil. It's absolute, which is to say, it's again a kind of a less than nothing, out of which nothing itself can arise. Okay, so this is a very important category for Žižek. He calls it less than nothing in his 2012 book of the same title, and he also uses a synonym for the same notion in his 2014 book, Absolute Recoil, because this absolute Gegenstoß, absolute recoil, is also a less than nothing. Okay, this is the proper beginning, as it were. Okay, so this is very useful to understand Hegel. Okay, the flip of a coin, the very mundane example, trivial example of the flip of a coin, or the throw of a dice. You throw a dice, and while it's still in the air, its ontological state is radically indeterminate. That's to say, it is radically contingent, and by arriving at its destination, it becomes necessary. But it's freely necessary because it came to be out of radical contingency. Okay? This is also the way through which becoming in Hegel's logic, is the dialectical unity of being and nothing. How does an entity come to be? The becoming of an entity is precisely this immediate unity of being and nothing. It's being as it is nothing. It is a non-thing. Okay? And how does one arrive at this strange notion? By taking recourse to this philosophical distinction between a negative judgment and an infinite judgment that we get in German idealism from Kant onwards. Okay? A negative judgment is, of course, when you simply negate a thing. Okay? But an infinite judgment is when you assert a non-being. Okay? Which is the difference between saying that someone isn't alive, which means it is dead, and saying that someone is not alive. It is basically the mode of being of a zombie, a vampire. It's the living dead, which is another name for Žižek, for the death drive. Okay, so this is all very interesting and useful to understand Hegel and Hegel's dialectics, Hegel's thought in general. Okay, so this is again a very brief video, and I hope that you could get at least something useful out of it. Okay, bye bye, and see you soon.